episode number 13 of the Who Am I podcast with the Southside Church of Christ. This is Brian Dill.
I'm Jackson Wells.
And we are excited to have with us today our friend Adam Richardson, who is the preacher for the Petersville congregation in Alabama, in the name of the town just left me, Florence, Alabama.
Right. Yes, that's the town. Don't feel bad. I forget sometimes too.
Okay. Well, good. So, Adam, we are glad that you have joined us for this episode, and we are especially excited about the first part of this episode where we get to surprise you with some random questions. All right, so here we go. Here, we're going to give you 5 questions. All right.
And I do not think quickly on my feet. So
that's okay.
This is going to be bad. Right. This is going to be bad.
You take your time. Number 1, you have lived in South Carolina. You've lived in a couple different places in Western Tennessee. You have lived in Mississippi. You have lived now in Alabama.
Correct.
Now, without disparaging anything about any of them, of course, every state has their pluses and minuses and whatever, and that's fine. Amongst the places you have lived, who has the best barbecue?
Oh, I thought if you didn't want me to disparage, then you needed to pick up another topic. Because people take their barbecue seriously.
I know
that. Barbecue is serious. Look, I've had really good barbecue and I like barbecue. I will still say to this day that the 2 best barbecue places I have been, one is in Clemson, South Carolina. It's called the Smoking Pig, and it is fabulous stuff. It's right outside of Clemson. They've featured it, on when game day came to Clemson a couple times. I think every time Clemson or game day has come to Clemson, they have gone to eat at the Smoking Pig. Now they'll also go to some other places,
right?
But they really and they should. They really know how to do good barbecue. And I know that some Texas people are going to be angry when I say this, but the best brisket I ever had was in South Carolina at the Smoking Pig. They really did that brisket well. It was amazing. But the other place, I'm really lucky to be able to say this because it is true, is about 2 miles from my house where I'm sitting right now. And that's a little hole-in-the-wall place called Sledge's Barbecue. Miles and Tina Sledge, good couple, and they have been doing barbecue for decades, and they know what they're doing. He's let me come back there and see the smoke pit and how he does his wings and how he does his the pork and everything. And they have something here in North Alabama I've never had anywhere else at any other barbecue place, and it goes with chicken, so it doesn't necessarily go with pulled pork or barbecue, but they'll have it at every barbecue place. It's a white sauce, and I haven't had it in any other place before.
Yeah, I've never heard of a white sauce.
Yeah, white sauce.
I've heard of it,
totally,
but never had it.
Yeah, and it's fabulous on on the chicken that they do out here and stuff. And
now, on barbecue chicken.
Yeah, so they'll do barbecue chicken or smoked. Sledges really likes they smoke. He smokes chicken. Oh my goodness, it's fabulous. And then they'll make their own chicken. They make chicken sandwiches and they do wings. I'll put the white sauce on the wings instead of like a barbecue sauce or something like that. But it's one of those places. It's only open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So you got to go. And at 11 o'clock in the morning, that place is full, and you're just going to have to wait till about 1:30 or 2. It's just going to be packed, and it's so good, so good.
Okay, so I was about to say, I've been to Florence twice. And you have not taken me. No, I 3 times. And you have not taken me to this barbecue place.
I know.
But you just answered that question Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Right.
I
You
don't
just
think I've
thought
ever
we were
been on one of those
friends,
days.
No, that's what it is. Yeah, it's not you personally. I vetted you well enough. I think that you would be allowed in, but it's really good. I mean, their pulled pork sandwich is really good. So
All right.
All right.
Jackson and I are planning a trip then.
Yeah. Need some good barbecue.
you tell me when. I'll make it happen.
All right. My first question for you is I've not known you for very long, and I still don't know you very well. But the first time that I interacted with you was at I believe Top Golf in Nashville.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my question for you is someone who spent some time at Top Golf. What is the best game mode?
Oh, that's a good question. So now I'm just going to cut to the chase because different Top Golf venues have different types of computer access and different
Right.
types of technology. So Nashville has the higher class, the newer version of their technology,
Okay.
which is called Top Tracer. So it actually has a camera that will follow your golf ball, and it will use that camera data to trace how much spin there is on the ball, what the ball speed is, where the trajectory is going, and all that kind of stuff. And so they can use that to simulate the flight of your golf ball. And so they have fun games where you can, they can create a completely virtual environment, and they will show you where your golf ball goes.
Yeah.
And so I loved it when they, Angry Birds is a fun phone game that I was really addicted to when it first came out. I had to limit my screen time when Angry Birds came out. And so when they had it on the golf, at Top Golf, I really loved playing it. And it's kind of fun. There's a lot of luck, that goes into that, I think. And so that can make it fun for groups, to play, because you don't necessarily have to just be based on who's the best. But then my favorite, I just love, a place like Nashville has virtual golf courses.
Yeah.
And so you can go play Pebble Beach,
It's pretty cool.
or St. Andrews, over in Scotland. And I think that's really fun. It's got limitations, but for my money, that's what I'm going to spend a lot of time doing if I'm up in Nashville.
Love it. Love it.
It's great. It's great.
I thought he was going to say Jewel Jam, but I guess not.
I was not going to say Jewel Jam, and I didn't want to, I did not want to burden your listening public with my diatribe against the evils of that ridiculous game. If you take your toddler, if you take your 3-year-old to Top Golf, let them play Jewel Jam. Other than that, no sane human being should ever look at that option.
All right. That's perfect.
I feel like he's actually mad about that.
Oh man, he
I
hates
am
that game.
I
with
am
a passion.
literally angry about that game. I have never won that game. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, Asher consistently beats me at that game. Just by happenstance. Okay, so the next question. I was looking at the calendar and I was thinking about when this episode is going to be released, and I realized it's pretty close to the end of the month of March, the beginning of April, and I thought, I don't know if I've ever asked you this before. Have you ever played an April Fool's joke on your congregation where you were preaching?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't think I've ever done a specific April Fool's joke on the congregation or folks like that. And now I'll be honest, it's been a couple of years since I've actually set out to plan a really good April Fool's Day gag.
Right.
I feel like I've done a couple in my youth when I was, young and dumb. Now I'm old and dumb and I can't get away with it as much. That's the problem.
Yeah, you should know better than to do something like that.
I should. It doesn't stop me, but I should. But no, I haven't. I don't think I'm always worried about, I'm worried about, I read all those stories about how those backfire, and it's like, haha, I'm breaking up with you. And it's like, well, fine, I was cheating on you anyway. So I was April Fool's.
Yeah.
It's too late. It's too late.
Yeah.
So I don't want to give anybody that chance. So.
Right. Yeah. You April Fools, joke be, I'm moving on to a new work. And then you have people say,
right.
hallelujah.
Woo, finally, we were waiting. Exactly.
And you're like, oh wait, no, I'm
what I meant
kidding.
to say.
I've heard the one where, you know, the guy pretends he's moving. I've heard of the one where the guy announces his wife's pregnant and she's not really, and people
Ooh.
get really excited for a second, and then he says, "Just
Yep.
kidding," and then people are kind of mad.
People get, yeah, and I
Why
have
would you do
heard,
that
you
to
know, I've
us?
seen people, I've seen people post on the internet, you know, there's people out in the congregation that are infertile, and you don't joke about, you know, pregnancies and
Right,
stuff like
right.
that. So, you know,
Yeah, you
you
gotta
don't
be
want to,
really careful with that kind of thing.
you got to know your audience. You definitely got
Right.
to know who your people are.
I double
Honestly,
dog dare
among
you.
the three of us, I think Jackson could get away with it.
Announcing
yeah.
that my wife is pregnant.
No, not that. No,
I don't have a wife.
No, I
You
think
could announce
I
an
think you could-
engagement.
you could announce. Oh man,
That would be.
Oh no. Honestly, I was thinking more in terms of you've got the youth group. You can mess with them all you want, you know.
Oh
Right.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
that could actually be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll miss, yeah, and I have no objections to messing with the youth group. I mess with kids.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
They
you
need to
should
be
do
messed
that.
with.
They
They
do,
mess with
they
me
do.
enough. They deserve it.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
All right. Next question. This one's completely hypothetical.
Okay.
Kind of like a would you rather. Given the choice between fighting 100 chicken-sized horses or one horse-sized chicken, what would you rather fight to the
Ooh.
death?
To the death. How many horse-sized or chicken-sized horses?
100.
100, but they're horses
Yeah.
versus a chicken that is the size of, well, let's just call that what it is. That's called an ostrich.
I think it would be slightly bigger.
Slightly bigger. The neck
Yeah.
would not be, you know, part of the what you would factor in. I can tell you one thing: my wife would not be around for that fight. My wife is deathly afraid of birds, and a chicken that were that large would be the end of her.
Okay.
I want so the truth of the matter is I would definitely take on the horses, because as small as they are, I'm not really worried about the amount of, the only real weapon they have at their disposal is the hind kick. And
Yeah.
if their legs are only 6 inches long, they just can't get enough of a punch there. So
Okay.
I'm
Ankle
going to
biters.
be able to take them out. But I would like to say that I would be able to take out a chicken, just because that would be like the ultimate Clemson Tiger fan dream come true, is to get in the ring with the chicken. I'm thinking, about taking out, the mascot,
The clout. Yeah.
right. Yeah. So
Okay.
it would be a dream come true, but I'm telling you, they don't have, rooster fighting rings for no reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Those animals are dangerous.
Yes.
They are. I'm just imagining I had chickens when I was in high school, and we'd let them out, or let them scrounge around. I've seen a chicken that is tiny eat an entire snake. Now the snake wasn't but that big, 6 inches long, which is, still an impressive thing for a chicken to do. Now I'm imagining a chicken with, it just scaled up. I'm imagining that thing coming at me, and it just takes.
And when
one
they
little
get riled
peck.
up, when they get riled up, they're fearless.
Yeah.
They don't care.
Yeah.
They will take you out. So I would not want to be face to face with one of those. Sorry.
We watch America's Funniest Videos, and some of the videos that we've seen a lot of lately has been, people getting attacked by a chicken or a duck or a
and
goose
it's chasing
or
them
whatever.
around the.
And Dana's answer to that every time is like, "This is stupid. It's just a little bird. Kick it or something. It's not going to be able to do anything to you." I was like, "Dana, you have no idea. You've never been chased by one of these things.
You lose all of your survival instincts." But I will say, once you finally do it one time, you're like, oh.
Yeah. Then you realize, but it's, you talk about like a goose or something, and they go and spread their wings, and they got like a 4-foot wingspan, and they start stretching out towards you. That's a little intimidating, even when they're that size. You start getting a much bigger than that. We got a problem.
Especially when you're like 11.
Yeah, there's big
Coming after
you.
you.
Some of us know, exactly how that works because
Man.
yeah. The Brian's wearing his Palmetto Bible Camp shirt, which I appreciate. But at Palmetto Bible Camp, we had a duck or we had a goose for a while, and it was very territorial little booger. You did not want to cross Charlie because there was no fear. He would eat you alive.
Yeah, he would. Golly.
Man.
Okay, so our final question. This is a very simple one.
Uh-huh.
What's the square root of 121?
That I will be able to answer that question as soon as you remind me what a square root is. It will not be a difficult thing for me to do.
If you
I
could
am-
find a calculator.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, Google. My phone will help me. It's 11, but
Hey, you got it.
All right. What do you
I've
know?
been thinking about it this entire time. I have been sandbagging you with jokes while I figured out what is the square root of 121 because I hate math so very much.
Oh man,
And you
me
know
too.
that.
Me
You
too.
knew that. You brought out the kryptonite against me.
I did. I
You
did.
knew.
Just because I knew the reaction would be fantastic.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed that. Yes. Oh man, I'm going to be off balance the rest of this
I know.
podcast.
Okay, so now we're gonna get into the meat of the week, and Adam is joining us for this episode to discuss kind of an unusual question, I would say.
Yeah.
So many of our questions we have tried to focus on perhaps something that is based strictly in scripture in some way, or perhaps that is a question about scripture when it comes to our identity as Christians. But this question is, I think, a whole different brand of question, at least as far as what we're going to deal with today. And the question is, am I woke? So, Adam.
So
What are some things, what kinds of things immediately come to mind for you when that term is used?
I think that we're definitely talking about something that's a really tricky subject to address. I just, for the fun of it, just to kind of get a pulse on what's going on with that term right now, just
Right?
did a Google search.
Okay.
And
Okay.
3 days ago, there was an interview taking place, political, folks talking about different things, and this author was asked what she meant by the term woke, and she had a meltdown on not a meltdown. She had a what we would call maybe a brain freeze.
I see.
She was using the term. So the interviewer was asking questions, and she was saying, this is woke and that's woke. And the interviewer said, so what do you mean by woke, so that I can make sure we're on the same page?
Right.
And she blanked.
Fair
She
question.
was like, right. So the idea of wokeness right now is a really big deal. Like, again, just talking about exactly what's happening in the news right now. There was an article in the USA Today on March the 9th
Okay.
on what does woke mean?
Great.
Asking that
Okay.
exact question. What does woke mean? The bank that collapsed, and I'm not a financial guy, but Silicon Valley Bank, right?
Right.
So it's collapsing and it's closed up, and that's really bad. And there were several articles the week, that they shut down or whatever, that accused part of the problem on their risk assessment manager. The risk manager was too busy with woke politics and policies than
Okay.
to pay attention to where the money was going. And so there's this whole thing going on right now with the idea of where these banks, are these businesses woke businesses, and is it hurting or helping, their business practices and
Sure.
stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
So when we're talking about, it's really important that we start with a discussion about defining our terms. Right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
I think that it's really important to recognize that this term has been shifting lately.
Yes.
I've looked it up. I've looked it up in 3 different places, and 3 different sources that I talked about were very blunt to say that it is, the definition is in flux right now, that it has changed from what it used to be. And so, they say, this word's been around as a term for consciousness, for social consciousness, at least from what I could find, 100 years or more. And I am not equipped, to speak to the history of this term, right? So this is way
Right.
beyond
Right.
the my purview. This is a bigger thing from me, but the fact of the matter is any definition you pick, somebody else is going to be able to come after you and say, well, I disagree with that because that's not the definition that I use,
Right.
And so
Right.
trying to figure out what it means to be woke right now, I'm just talking about within this 3-year period,
Sure.
means different things to different people, because originally it was Merriam-Webster, right? They said originally it was being aware of and actively attentive to important facts and issues. I am awake, right? I'm woke.
Okay.
But then by the end of the 2000s, when you get into the 2010, 2011, it had become a pejorative term for anyone who appears left-leaning.
Right.
Now, those are two very different meanings.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I found a little surprising, because I've heard it used maybe a little bit in that pejorative way, and that's all it means is just anybody that's left of center.
Right.
And I was surprised by that, because that has actually, from what research I was able to do, that has been an evolution of the term, like you said, just in the last 3-4 years. Not even considering the fact, like you said, this is a term that goes back 100 years, and even being used as a term for something that is in any way related to social issues, that even goes back 80 years, because I saw references in the 40s to racial injustice, even going back as far as that. And so I thought, wow, how strange that it has gone from that use and was used in that way for decades, and then it has morphed a couple different times in the last maybe 10 years.
I would say probably one of the major reasons for that happening is originally it was part of one particular community's language.
Yes.
Right. This was a part of the Black community.
Yes.
And they're the ones that started using that term as an idea for being aware of, what's going on racially, what's being, are you conscious of, what's happening to our people, as a concept. And then, and just to use that concept, most everybody outside of that community was not woke. They weren't aware of it as a term. It wasn't that wasn't a concept, that they would be keyed in on, like it was within that community. But then you had, George Floyd, and you had, other members of the Black community that were, brutality or police, injustice or things like that. So the Black Lives Movement comes along and people really get on board with that. And the term woke meets a broader audience.
Exactly.
And so now it's a term that's not limited to one community. And as it has been in the last 10 years, introduced to a wider audience, new people are taking that term and they're beginning to associate it with different things and get into different areas of meaning. And that's why it's in flux right now. And I mean, I think a good first question to ask is that even fair? Do you get to take somebody else's word and then make it start applying to other things and other issues, or not?
Right.
How that works and looks.
Whenever you take that term and you give it to a broader audience, the things that I want to be woke about aren't going to be the same things that you want to be woke about.
Bingo.
And
That's
so
right.
you automatically are creating division in what the goal is to bring everybody together. So it's slightly paradoxical.
And I think
Right. It
that's
winds up being it winds up being segregatory rather than, an umbrella to bring people under.
so that's definitely the progression that I read in multiple places, where it went from, just like Adam said, in the African American community, a term that is used to be alert to the racial injustices that are going on, acknowledge that that's what's going on. Let's think about ways to try and combat that in some way, and that sort of thing. And that's what it was for so long, until within the last 10 years. And the first shift was exactly what Jackson just said, in that it became, now woke is just a term that anybody can use to refer to any perceived injustice that they think everybody needs to be alert to, and they think that something needs to be done about this, right? And then from there, I think what has happened is, in reaction to that term being used so broadly, now there's this almost knee-jerk reaction that says,
it's a backlash.
Now we're going to use this as a pejorative about all of these left of center ideas. And it's just trying to have this discussion that we're trying to have today is
it's complicated.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say that USA Today article I mentioned just from last week. They polled Americans. I don't know how many they look at. You may have seen the same poll.
Okay.
But they've got their own definition of woke. So, well, they ask Americans, what does woke mean to you? So 56% said that woke means to be informed, educated on, and aware of social injustices. So that's a definition, nearly 60% of people. Then the 39% of people, there was, again, so this is still close. It's a little bit leaning towards that first definition, but 40% said to be overly politically correct and police one's words, or police others' words.
Okay.
So when it began to be associated with cancel culture, which we might talk about a little bit, more, in a minute. But so those definitions are very different, and one of them is much more, like we've said, pejorative than the other.
Exactly.
That we need to be aware of. We're in dangerous water. I mean, you just need to know that.
Right. Oh yeah.
Because there's articles out there. Slate has an article that if you're white, you're using the word wrong. Period.
Just period. No matter what.
Yeah. Both sides of the aisle. It doesn't matter if you're trying to be woke, or if you're trying to oppose wokeness, as some kind of political correctness, you're wrong. Now that's a couple of years old, and the definition has continued to shift. So, we're still aware of that. And that's what makes it complicated. But when we're going to ask a question, am I woke? You need to understand the spectrum that you're looking at here, and what version of that are you going to be keying in on to try and figure out, is this something that I want to associate myself with or not?
And I think that's what the evolution of the term over the last 4 or 5 years has created, when it comes to the confusion about it, is some people immediately associate certain things with the term and say, you as a Christian should have nothing to do with any semblance of wokeness.
Right.
And it's a kind of a knee-jerk reaction. And I think that's kind of where I wanted us to dig in a little bit more and say, is that really where we should be? Or should we maybe acknowledge that there are some elements of the way this is used sometimes, depending on the context, that is perfectly biblical and scriptural.
Right. Yeah. I mean, now, I want to throw this in because you mentioned it earlier that it's kind of strange and new, how negatively the word is being used. Kind of, it's articles I read talk about it being weaponized.
Right.
It is an insult, and this idea of avoiding wokeness. There are definitely areas and there are definitely people from the political standpoint who are using that as a rallying cry. There was a politician just over in the past month or so who started their campaign, and the statement that they made in their campaign speech was wokeness is a virus more dangerous than any pandemic, hands down.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
And so that's somebody who is in a very public political arena, speaking at a national level, and they are, there are ways that term is being used to lump everybody that's bad, into a group. And whether or
Right.
not that's fair or not, whether or not that's appropriate, whether or not I agree with the politician or not, all of that's beside
Right.
the point. What I'm getting at is it is being, there is a segment of people that are taking the term and they're using it to create a label that you have to be
Yes,
aware of.
absolutely. And those blanket statements like that I think are problematic
Yeah.
in that it communicates a message to people that if you don't do a little more digging, if you don't look a little closer at how this term is used, you may trust that politician A or B or whatever knows what they're talking about, and or just whoever it is that has a public forum available to them is speaking accurately, and then you just go along with it, and
Right.
that's one of our biggest challenges, I think, especially as Christians, to try and sort through the weeds a little bit and get a little better sense of what this really means and how it can be used in different contexts, and make sure that we're not making assumptions about it.
Well, that's, what you're describing there is critical thinking. I think if
Right.
anything, Christians need to be critical thinkers. And
Yes.
anything that dampens or hampers or prohibits critical thinking, I don't care where it's coming from, that's problematic. I
Absolutely.
teach I teach logic and debate and some from the philosophy standpoint and stuff like that, like at the high school level, nothing major, but we talk about, when it comes like to debate, for instance, not only is defining your terms important, but when you're practicing debate, like debate teams and things like that, oftentimes what really helps you develop your critical thinking skills is I make students debate both sides of the issue.
Yes.
I'll give you a proposition, and the first go round, student A has the affirmative and student B has the negative. But then after they finish that, I'm going to make them swap sides, and they're going to have, and that's not, I didn't invent that at all. That is a pretty standard practice,
Right.
to go through and make sure. Here's kind of what it boils down to. No matter how much I disagree with the conclusions of another person or another group, there's a kernel in there that makes sense.
Sure.
It certainly makes sense to them. And
Right.
if I'm thinking critically about it, I could probably find what that is. I could find the things that I share in common. I say, like, you know what? I agree with that part. I agree with that part. Here's the points that I get, and here's the points that I do think are significant. Now, once you get to this point, you start to lose me, right? So we have to
Right.
continue discussing this stuff over here. But if you can't find anything positive or anything, that makes sense about your opponent's, view, you're probably not looking hard enough.
Right.
That's evidence that you're not using critical thinking quite enough. Now, that's not to
There's
say
a
there aren't a couple of purely evil people out there,
Sure, sure. You're saying you're not thinking critically about it. There's another term for that. Intellectually
That
lazy.
yeah, there's a lot. It's so much easier to follow the crowd, right? We
It
just talk
is.
about,
It is.
just pick a side and then just follow blindly wherever they go. And then you release yourself of responsibility. You release yourself
Right.
from the burden of having to wrestle with this stuff. And it's simple. It's easy to just say, "Hey, I'm in this camp." That's. I think initially that was one of the things that the idea of being woke was trying to address. It's just because something doesn't happen to you specifically doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
Right.
And you need
Right.
to wake up. You need to
Yes.
be aware of the broader conversation. There are things going on outside of your immediate perspective that are significant and that matter.
Yes.
And that's really, in that, from that standpoint, yeah, we need to wake up. We need to be aware of those realities beyond just what's happening to us and right around us.
So with that in mind, then let's talk a little bit about that common ground that you mentioned. Let's talk a little bit about some of the elements of the message, whether it is the original context of what it meant to be woke, even transitioning in some of the ways that it has today. What are some of the elements of the woke culture that we could say, yeah, that's actually a biblical principle?
So I kind of tie this into, as I was thinking about this idea, I'm really big on what Paul says over in 1 Corinthians 9, 19 and following, about being all things to all men, so
Okay.
that by all means I can save some, right? And
Right.
so he's like, to the Jews, I am someone who is under the law so that I can reach the Jews. But to the Gentiles, I'm not under the law. I'm free. So I can be what I need to be for the Gentiles. And in every circumstance and situation, I believe one of the things Paul is saying there is, I'm looking for commonality. I'm
Mm,
looking for the common ground. I believe an element of being woke is required for that. To have that perspective, how can I understand how to have a conversation with someone who is a part of a different group than me? I don't care if it's ethnicity, I don't care if it's gender, I don't care if it's socio, economic, I don't care if it's culturally, language. If all I have is my own perspective, I'm going to be extremely limited in my ability to connect with them.
yeah, that's
And
right.
so, initially, at its bare minimum, there's that idea of being aware of and conscious to another person's perspectives and another person's experiences that are different from my own, and acknowledging that and trying to understand, okay, if I were in your shoes, I would probably feel the exact same way.
Mm,
And then being able to have that conversation, I believe it starts with at least an element of that aspect of wokeness, what we mean.
right.
Um, what One of the things that's changed, one of these things that shifted, and I found this in a couple different places that I was looking, is the idea that originally it was a term for a consciousness. It was a term for an outlook and an approach. But
Okay.
now it has become associated with action.
Oh.
So only activists are the ones who are really woke. So if
Oh.
you're aware of something and you're not out there fighting against it, if you're not out there doing something about it, if you're not trying to tear down this
Right.
establishment or this system, then you're not truly woke.
Oh,
And
interesting. Okay.
so that's where that animosity begins to come from. you
Yes.
know
Yes.
Cancel culture, maybe as the concept of cancel culture kind of rose at the same time as the concept of wokeness. That was that activism at work. That was that if you mess up,
Right.
then you are obviously clueless and you are asleep and you are not awake, and so we're not going to listen to you, we're going to cancel you or whatever like that.
Mm,
And so then it becomes more antagonistic, as a
right.
concept, and it becomes a thing that other people are going to retaliate against.
Right. And again, it goes
free
back to
speech
what
and that kind of
Jackson
stuff.
was saying. It becomes more divisive, which
Right.
is the opposite of what it was supposed to do. It was supposed to be about.
What it theoretically could be drawing people together. Yeah.
Right. Right. Well, that's interesting. I had written down some verses that came to my mind, and 1 Corinthians 9 was not one of them. I hadn't really thought about it in quite that same way, from that perspective of trying to communicate with and relate to people from different backgrounds, whatever the difference may be. And I really I really appreciate that, especially because of the end game for Paul. The end game was
So that
not
by any means I might save some.
yes.
He says it. He says he does it for the sake of the gospel. And for the sake of the gospel, I won't be a Democrat or a Republican. For the sake of the gospel, I'm not going to try to get hung up on this or that or any of those boundaries. I'm going to try to see through those, to see over those, and when necessary,
Right.
and when possible, to knock those down, because the gospel is more important than all of those things.
Exactly. And our membership, our citizenship in God's kingdom is so much more important than our membership or citizenship in a racial group, in a socioeconomic group, in a gender group, or whatever. I mean, it's
doesn't mean those things cease to exist,
right?
But what's our priority? Our main priority is to that above all else.
Right.
At least I think that's what Paul is saying. And this is a
Oh,
guy
absolutely.
who his whole background before this change in his life, he was not interested in knocking down walls at all.
No, he was not.
He was really happy with the walls he had up.
That's right. That's right.
And so the change that occurs in him is an example, I believe, to us as to how much of a shift we need to be willing to make. What do I need to be willing to give up? In other places, Paul's going to say, I'm willing to give up everything. I'm willing to count all the stuff that I've got as trash and rubbish so that I can reach the real goal, the measure, the stature of the Son of God, and share in his resurrection, and then share that with other people. And if I have to be awake, if I have to be alert, if I have to be conscientious of what's going on with other people around me in order to reach them, why would I not?
Absolutely.
We have like Paul, from what we've talked about, Paul seems to be a pretty woke dude. Like he is, if we're using the definition of awareness, like he's so aware of this is what it's going to take for me to get to heaven. This is the action that I have to take. Like if we're applying the same things that are happening today, like Paul's fitting a lot of those things, but his goal wasn't to like we've talked about, tear down walls for himself, but to build a kingdom. Like he was there to bring others in. So like if I've got a couple of years ago, I learned how to skateboard. My mindset was I'm going to be able to relate to all these skater kids, Did that actually happen? No, I fell a couple times and I was like, I'm done with this.
Nope.
But now, hey, I can understand what it feels like to fall.
Right.
I'm woke to the bales, like
you can
bales,
appreciate.
I can appreciate what it feels like to fall. And so like I can talk to people about that. And then hopefully if it's as simple as that's an end to somebody at the skate park that I met. And, the next thing you know, you've got them come to church with you. It can be pretty effective.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, I think I want to ask this one last question, I think.
Let's see what happens.
Adam, are you woke?
Yeah. And again, I have my definition of what I like for woke. Yes. And as much as I can, I'm always going to try to be optimistic, and I'm always going to try to put a more positive spin on anything, that I'm encountering as much as I possibly can. Right. So I'm saying this with the full knowledge that there are definitely people who have an agenda and who are using the term woke as a negative connotation. They
Yes.
say that to be woke means to be against, certain things, or to be trying to shut down people who don't get it or who aren't in the know, and that kind of stuff. But
Right.
you talked about Bible verses earlier, and Paul does use the term for being awake in kind of a similar conscientious, state of mind.
Yes.
He says in Romans 13, verse 11, now is the time to awaken from sleep. In 1 Thessalonians 5, verses 6, he says, let us not sleep as others do, but be
Right.
alert and sober. Now, his context is not the original context of what woke meant, which is social, action and racial prejudice and things like that. He's talking about spiritual wokeness. And I feel like if you were gutsy enough, you could take that and you could say spiritual wokeness is more significant than racial wokeness, than political wokeness, than any other terminology for wokeness. There's going to be people that will not agree with that statement, right? And I will be more than happy to have a bigger conversation. So I'm not saying that, that's the only way to use this terminology, right?
Sure.
Because it's a very heavy word. It carries a lot of baggage for a lot of people. So I'm not trying to co-opt it from its original use, but I am saying Paul says spiritually, you need to be awake and you need to be aware of the bigger picture that is the spiritual reality.
Right.
There is an eternity. And if you're not preparing for it, then you are asleep, right? Jesus tells parables, same kind of thing,
right.
The definition, the idea of being asleep versus being awake. And who knows if that's not where the slang, maybe originated, as it began to be applied to the concept of awareness and alertness in other areas. So in the sense of knowing today that word is so volatile, I think you have to be very careful to just say that I'm woke. But in the sense that to be woke means to be aware of and attentive to the conscientious things that are going on around us, to be aware of other people's perspectives and experiences and recognize their differences from us so that I can make a conscientious connection to them. I believe we have to be woke in the sense of recognizing just because it has or has not happened to me doesn't mean that's the only thing that I need to focus on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think another way of answering that from maybe the more negative perspective or the negative side of it is, as far as our identity as Christians, we need to be very careful about using that term in very blanket, pejorative ways.
I think you need to be careful on both sides because
if
we have this exact same podcast in 10 years, it would have to be a different podcast.
Probably.
Because
absolutely.
this word is in process right now.
Exactly.
It is changing daily right now. And so for some people, it's going to have a negative connotation and you're not going to be able to shake that. And for some people, it's going to have a positive connotation and you're not going to be able to shake that. So you need to be able to speak both of those languages depending on who you're talking to, and avoid, again, the optimist in me, says, try to see the good in everything. And there are certainly good things, a lot of good things, if it's not taken to an extreme, if it's not taken too far. But I would say that about everything. I would say just about everything is dangerous in the extremes.
Absolutely. Yes.
And this would just be another part of that, another way to, another example of how that plays out.
Right. And maybe because we are a little more familiar with the extremes when it comes to the uses of this term. But I think as we're wrapping things up, what we really want to remember ultimately is that as we use caution in how we use this term, and as we use caution in any assumptions we make about people that do or don't use this term, ultimately, like Paul, our goal is eternity. Our goal is to be in Christ. And another portion of that goal is found in Mark chapter 12 and verse 31, when Jesus says or reminds us that we are to love our neighbor as ourselves.
Right.
A lot of the knee-jerk reactions to this term especially are reactions that are not keeping that.
They don't lend
first
themselves
mind.
to a loving interaction.
Right. Jackson, we haven't allowed you to say a whole lot today.
That is okay. I have enjoyed listening, because this is something, like I was telling Brian, the term woke for me, like I wasn't aware of it until it started to come up in political conversations. And as a teenager and someone in my mid-20s, the only exposure that I've had to the term woke has mostly been in the pejorative way.
Right,
and so
right.
it's not something that I would have ever considered being like it's good to be woke in the correct context. So
Right.
I've enjoyed listening and understanding it from that perspective. Hopefully there are a lot of people that are listening that are like me and like, okay, this makes sense now.
Cool.
Well, we really appreciate, Adam. We really appreciate you being with us today. We are glad that you agreed to come and speak on a subject that is very difficult. And
this would not be the topic that I would have imagined being chosen to come and address on a podcast. That's
right.
That's definitely the case. And anybody is, again, I am definitely human, and I am more than happy for anybody listening to this podcast to reach out and offer me some more education on this subject, because I do not claim to be anybody who has the right to speak on this too much, but just to think critically. I think we can think critically about anything. So that's what we were just trying to do today.
Exactly. All right. Well, we really appreciate it. And we really appreciate everyone who has listened to this podcast all the way through to this point. We hope that not everybody just turned it off as soon as they found out what we were discussing. But we especially pray that it has been helpful to you and helpful to your identity as a follower of Jesus Christ. And we are praying that you have a great week. Take care.